Hey there, YouTube. Artichoke Dip here, and I got a live stream I'm doing right now. And so, I have been meaning to get back into Four Against Darkness for a while. And um, when I had picked up the original book here, which is this one right here, I decided that um, to get the next one because I figured I'd go through this pretty quickly and level it up, and I'm glad I did. So, if you're not familiar with the next book of Four Against Darkness, it's pretty cool. Where the first set, you use two six-sided dice. In this set, they incorporate an eight-sider. And with your attacks, how it works out is every time you roll a 7 or an 8, plow, there we are. At that point, the dice explodes and you roll again and you add that up, and it is cumulative. So if you roll an 8 and you roll another 8, it's 16, and then your final roll, and then at that point you would add your attack bonus to that, which can be pretty rude. So yeah. So anyways, I have read some pretty cool reviews about some people that have used this system with modules. So I decided to try something a little different. And what I did was I have decided to explore Ravenloft. Now, I'm very familiar with this one, and if you don't have this for your library, I highly suggest you pick this up, whether you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan or not. And this is the one that started it all. This is the original Ravenloft that I don't even think TSR at the time when they came out with this realized how huge this was actually going to be. But I decided, since I'm starting characters at 5th level, let's see how they hold up against Ravenloft. Rather than just doing a dungeon delve, let's do something a little bit more interesting. So before I get into the video, if you like this video, hit the like button. And if you're not subscribed, please click the subscribe button, click the little bell icon, and as soon as I upload a new video or live stream a new video, you will be notified that my ugly mug did so. So before we jump right on into the game, let's get to know our characters. Actually, let's get to know this system a little bit more in depth first. So one of the cooler things that they had done with this system that I really liked is the fact that now they've incorporated skills, more classes, and they have given you rules that kind of touch on like the Call of Cthulhu for madness, vampirism, lycanthropy, hirelings that you can now hire, and professionals. They also give you plots for campaigns, more encounters, and overall it's pretty cool. Now, I've already kind of experimented with this a little bit and ran this through, and it works pretty good. I thought I would do that before I do a live stream. So, but definitely, if you enjoy Four Against Darkness, and you will need this core book in order to use this, I highly suggest you pick these two up at the same time, because you'll probably level up pretty quick, and then you can move on to higher level characters. Alright, let's get to know the characters now. So the first character I have is the warrior. That is his type. His name is Kyrian. He has an attack of 6, a defense of 2. His skill is Commanding Presence, which gives him a +1 to everybody in the party on saves, fear, terror, and morale. He's equipped with a two-handed sword of sorrow, He has plate armor, and he carries a potion of healing. The second one in the marching order is the type is an elf. His name is Zanhara. He has an attack of 5 unless he's using his elfish longbow, and at that point he gets an attack of +6. He has a defense of +1. His skill is deadly accuracy, +1 with a bow. His equipment is an elvish longbow, an elven scimitar. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a sword, leather armor, and a potion of healing. He also has the ability to cast spells. The spells he can cast is Blessing, which will heal any wounds, Magic Missile, Sleep, Fireball, and Fire Arrow. Now, the cool thing about 4 Against Darkness is it does leave you the ability to create your own spells. So I figured I have to add some good old classic RPG spells. What would a fantasy role-playing game be without Magic Missile? Now, I understand they can't do it because of copyright, but I can do it for my game. So the third one in the marching order, his type is a cleric. His name is Fontaine. He has a +2 to attack, a +5 to attack undead, a defense of 2. His skill is create holy water. His equipment is the Mace of Light. He is also equipped with the Blessed Armor of Light. He has a holy water vial and a holy symbol. He has 2 spells, Blessing, which he can cast 3 times per day, Divine Shield. Now, Divine Shield gives him a +3 to his defense against undead or evil. Yes. And the fourth one, his type is a wizard. His name is Vizante. He has an attack of +5 with magic. He has a defense of +1 for magic only because he wears an arcane cloak of +1 defensive magic. His skill is continual light, and I'll explain that a little bit further here in a minute. And he has the Staff of Solomon. His spells, he has Blessing, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Protect, which gives him a +5 to defense to the caster for 1d8 rounds, Magic Missile, Escape, which is out of the core book here, and Levitating Orb. So I created the spell Levitating Orb because he can cast Levitating Orb, and the orb levitates with the caster for 12 hours. So he can cast out the Levitating Orb, and then using the skill Continual Light, and then at that point, everybody in the party doesn't have to worry about a torch because they have a continual light that illuminates them. Unless the wizard gets killed, then the light goes out. Cool, 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 cool. All right, so I'm going to move on with this thing because I'm kind of excited. I'm going to try to go for about an hour with this and see how far I get into Ravenloft. All right, so I'm going to explain the backstory to you. So, in the backstory is Vizante and his crew had bought a scroll from a unsavory character, and the character told them that it would take them to a portal and to an area of hidden treasure beyond their wildest dreams. So they had, at that point, put their money together, purchased the scroll. He had cast it, and when they came out of the portal, they were in a land they didn't really recognize, but people still spoke their language, and so they more or less took it as that the spell was kind of a dud, and they found themselves in a quaint, quiet little village in a tavern. And at that point, they're drinking ale, eating hearty food. The environment's pretty happy. Everybody's talking and drinking and having a good time. That is, until the door opens up. Once the door opens up, At that point, the inn grows very quiet. A fog lies over the town on this evening, draping everything in its clammy grasp. The damp cobbled streets, as the light of the street lanterns dance across the slick stones, the cold fog chills the bones and shivers the soul of anyone outside. Mmm. Yeah, sounds like a good night to be in a tavern by a warm hearth. So, yet inside these tavern walls, food is hearty and the ale is warm and frothy. A fire blazes in the hearth, and the tavern is alive with the tumbling voices of country folk. Suddenly, a hush falls over the tavern. Even the flagons of ale seem to silence themselves. The tavern door swings open, framed by the lamp-lit fog. A form strides into the room. His heavy booted footfalls and the jingle of his coins shatter the silence. His brightly colored clothes are draped in loose folds about him, and his hat hangs askew, hiding his eyes in shadows without hesitation. He walks directly up to your table and stands proudly in a wide stance with folded arms. His accented voice speaks. I've been sent to you to deliver this message. If you be creatures of honor, you will come to my master's aid at first light. It is not advisable to travel the Slavic woods at night. He pulls from his tunic a sealed letter addressed to all of you in beautiful flowing script. He drops the letter on the table. Take the west road from here. 5 hours march down through the Slavic wood. There you will find my master in Barovia. Amid the continued silent stares of the patronage, the gypsy strides to the bar and says to the wary barkeeper, fill the glasses, one and all. Their throats are obviously parched. He drops a purse, heavy with gold, on the bar. With that, he leaves. The babble of tavern voices resumes. Although somewhat subdued, the letter is lying before you, dated yesterday. The ink is still not dry, and the parchment is crisp. The seal of a crest you do not recognize. So, the scene at this point is set. And we'll just say, here's the tavern floor. Here are the adventurers sitting around a table. Byzanti the wizard picks up the letter and says, well, at last, some answers to our questions we've been wondering. As he looks around the table, everybody in silence shrugs to themselves. Why not open it? He breaks the wax seal on the parchment, opens it up, and reads, Hail to thee, of might and valor. I am a lowly servant of the township of Bavaria. Send honor to thee. We plead for thy so desperately needed assistance within our community. The love of my life, Irina Kolania, has been affected by an evil so deadly that even the good people of our town cannot protect her. She languishes from her wound, and I would have her saved from this menace. There is much wealth in this community. I offer all that might be had to thee and thy fellows, if thou shalt but answer my desperate plea. Come quickly, for her time is at hand. All that I have shall be thine. Koland Indradovich, Burgomaster. They all sit in silence and look at one another. And then Byzanti says, well, at least we have an idea as to where the hell we are at. We are somewhere outside of, however they pronounce this, Stravich. The elf looks over at him and rolls his eyes and says, "If you haven't been paying attention, the name of the place is Slavlich. Slavlik. Even I can't pronounce it. I'm having a hard time pronouncing it." So they decide at this point, in order to get some answers to their questions, that they will answer the call, since after all, their promise was to find a great hidden treasure, and the note is promising them a great deal of wealth. They decide to head out. After they finish their ale, they head, it's now early afternoon as they start to trek away from this quaint, sleepy little village and towards the Slavich woods. Dun dun dun. And we had a few trees. There we go. All right. The black pools of water stand like dark mirrors about the muddy roadway. Thick, cold mist spread a pallor over the road. Giant tree trunks stand on both sides of the road, their branches clawing into the mist in every direction. The mist grows thicker, and the forest grows more oppressive. As they slowly travel through the woods, and is more oppressive and thicker and darker as the woods get, they begin to hear the howl of wolves. More and more. They hear somewhere off in the distance a rustling in the forest, and they keep pressing on. About 4.5 hours into their trip, at that point, they can see farther up ahead in the distance looks what appears to be a gate. They feel more or less relieved, as if maybe they'll be coming back into civilization soon, as that point the sun starts growing lower in the sky. As they approach the gate, jutting from the impenetrable woods on both sides of the road, high stones buttress loom up gray in the fog. Huge iron gates hang on the stonework. Dew clings with cold tenacity to the rusted bars. Two statues of armed guardians silently flank the gate. Their heads missing from their shoulders now lie among the weeds at their feet. They greet you only in silence. As the adventurers grow closer and closer to the gates, the warrior looks around, but he doesn't see a gate man anywhere. And the gate appears to be closed. And without a key, that can mean quite a problem. As they get about 50 feet from the gates, they notice that the gates at that point make a creaking noise and open out towards them. A heavy misty fog rolls, and its tendrils almost look like hands reaching out at them, and then at that point roll back in behind the gates. The warrior looks back at his party members and they all shrug their shoulders like, I don't know. And they press on, passing through the gates. At first, they're blinded by the heavy, thick fog. They feel a dark chill that chills them to the bone as they emerge from the fog. Unknowing to them, all of them have been just poisoned. All of them breathing the fog of Ravenloft. Now the poison clings to all their organs in their body. And turning back at this point is not an option. It will only kill them. Because without the mist and the fog, they will surely die. As they cross the gates, they hear the gates at that point make the same and close behind them, with nobody there that they can see operating the gate. As they continue down the trail, the towering trees whose tops are lost in heavy gray mist block out all save a death gray light. The tree trunks almost touch the thick, damp undergrowth, presses in on you, making it impossible even to see one another at all at times. The woods have the silence of a forgotten grave, yet exude the feeling of an unsounded scream. So at this point, Vizanti's going to cast his levitating orb spell, and using his skill, Continual Light, the orb at that point illuminates the area so they can see. But even he notices the light doesn't pierce the darkness very far, almost like it's swallowed up by some supernatural force. As they head deeper into the woods, they start to find paw tracks of what looks like large wolves everywhere in the mud. And as they continue further and further in, they find what looks like a scuffle may have happened. At that point, the elf notices something in the tall undergrowth. As they look, they find a dead villager in the underbrush. He holds an envelope crumbled in his hand. The remains of his clothes are torn and raked with claw marks. Paw prints of many large wolves are pressed into the clay around the body. The man has obviously been dead for several days. The letter is dated 1 week ago. It is sealed with a large B. The parchment is worn and flimsy. It reads as follows: Hail thee of might and valor. I, the burgomaster of Bavaria, send you honor with despair. My adopted daughter, the fair Irina, has been these past nights bitten by a creature calling its race vampire. For over 400 years he has drained this land of the lifeblood of its people. Now, my dear, Irina languishes and dies from an unholy wound caused by this vile beast. Yet I fear too that the creature has some more cunning plan in mind. He has become too powerful to be fought any longer. So I say to you, give us up for dead and encircle this land with the symbols of good. Let holy men call upon their power, that the evil one may be contained within the walls of weeping Bavaria. Leave our sorrows to our graves and save the world from this evil fate of ours. There is much wealth entrapped in this community. Return for your reward after we are all departed for a better life. Kolian Indrodovich Burgomaster. At that point, the adventurers are looking confused to themselves because the one parchment that they got dropped off from the gypsy earlier, even though very similar, contradicts. At that point, Vizanti says, I think in order for us to get any answers, we have to press forward. Go into this village, ask some questions, and maybe find out where we're at and how to get home. They hear the howl of wolves and the rustling in the deep, thick overgrowth of the woods behind them. As they look around, at that point, Carrion the warrior says in a very stern voice, ready your weapons, be prepared for anything. He draws his two-handed sword. Sahara the elf draws his elven longbow and readies an arrow. Fontaine the cleric pulls out his mace, while Vizantani the wizard at that point speaks to himself with closed eyes, recalling the spell. As the thrashing through the woods draws closer and closer, from the dark shadows they see red eyes appear, the retinas of these animals reflecting off of the orb of continual light. And then they burst forth from the shadows, one lunging after the warrior, the other one following soon up behind, and then another one behind that. At that point, Carrion screams out and swings his sword at this humongous wolf of very large proportion. So let's see how he does. Roll a 5. He has an attack of +6, which gives him 11. And the wargs are a level 4, but they have 6 hit points. And at that point, as this two-handed sword comes down, beheads the beast before it can attack, and the corpse goes sliding past him in the mud to where it comes to a stop over here. The elf quickly releases the arrow at the second incoming wolf. Oh, it's cumulative. Rolled 7. 5. That's pretty good. 12. Rolled a 17. Yeah. So the arrow releases, and at that point, boom, buries itself into the chest of the wolf. The wolf makes a quick screech of pain, and then at that point, stumbles and rolls into a heap of fur and blood, dead at the feet of the elf. The wizard at that point looks up at the other wolf getting ready to attack, tells the cleric at that point to deliver an attack and be swift. The cleric steps up, swinging his mace. At that point, the mace comes down, crashing into the ribcage of the wolf. It cries out in pain, but is not killed from it, baring its large white teeth. At that point, the wizard releases a spell. He releases a magic missile into the thing. Cool. And it does an additional. An arrow of magical energy forms out of the air, shoots, finding itself into the wolf, crashing into the rib cage. The wolf cries out and then slinks to the ground lifeless. At that point, the warrior says we should keep our weapons ready and be ready for anything that may come out of these woods. I think these woods are cursed, and so are we. The elf nods at him, draws another arrow, and knocks the arrow into his bow. At that point, they continue on, looking for this area called Barovia. As they walk further and further into the woods, it just becomes darker and darker. Their ears begin to ring from the silence. The silence is almost deafening. At that point, what seems like an eternity later, they once again hear the howl of more wolves in the distance. Needless to say, all of them feel a cold chill running down their spine, knowing they got lucky with the last encounter, but not knowing how this encounter will go from here on out. As they round a short curve, once again they hear the rustling of more wolves as they protrude and come dashing out of the undergrowth. This time, they lunge out from the left-hand side. A pack of them. The warrior doesn't hesitate but turns, swinging the sword. And at that point, once again, delivering a fatal blow to the first wolf. The elf releases his arrow. Ooh. At that point, the arrow hits the hindquarter of the animal, wounding it but not killing it. It shrieks out in pain, and then at that point, its fur expands and bellows out as it lets out a deep, angry growl and fixes its eyes on the elf. The cleric swings his mace at the next wolf. And once again, wounding the animal but not killing it. Ooh, this is where the tide turns. As the elf fumbles to grab another arrow, the wolf lurches at the elf. Grabbing a hold of his arm and viciously tearing at his flesh that's trying to reach the arrow. The elf is wounded, and he's going to take 6 points of damage from that. This wolf moves up towards the cleric. And at that point, even though he's heavily armored, the wolf finds a weak spot behind his legs, where the armor is broken for his legs to be able to move, and sinks its fangs into his leg, ripping flesh from it. And he will suffer 4 points for that damage. Warrior steps in, swinging down his sword upon the wolf, protecting his comrade. At that point, killing the beast. The wizard, recalling the spell as quickly as he can, casts a lightning bolt onto the beast. Seven plus 5. That's awesome. Which is more than enough for what he needs. Lightning at that point emits from the spellcaster's hand, encompassing the wolf, and ultimately the raw magical energy kills the beast as it screams out in agony, and at that point falls to the feet of the cleric, dead. The cleric turns to the elf and tends to his wounds. He's going to cast his first blessing on for the day, and that's d6 plus his level, which is 5. So 5 plus 5 is 10. That's more than enough to heal the elf up completely. The cleric decides to leave his other blessing spell and continue on with his wounds. And at that point, they press on even further into the darkness of the Slavic forest. So let's look at the map here. They were here. What seems to be a quiet travel for some amount of time, and they kind of felt a sigh of relief, like maybe they have taken care of all the wolves. As they track down this muddy trail, they come to a curve, and as they come out of the curve, they can see in the distance lights from a city, which must be Barovia. And they feel a sigh of relief, but that sigh is quickly broken by the sound of howling and another attack of wolves at that point that charge onto the walking path itself, or the road, I should say, all charging for the warrior. The warrior at that point, overcome by all of this, starts swinging wildly. He rolled a 3, and he has an attack of 6, which will give him a 9. The wargs are a level 4, so unfortunately he mortally wounds this one, but it's not dead. The elf sidesteps him and fires an arrow at this wolf right here. He rolled an 8. That dice explodes. He rolled a 7. That explodes again. Wow! And a 1, so 16 plus a 6. I'm not even going to add the bonus into it because that's more than enough to kill this thing. He releases the arrow. The arrow quickly finds its mark, and the animal doesn't even let out a screech. The shot's so lethal, it just falls to its feet, and pile of fur and blood. The cleric charges up to the left side of the warrior, and at that point, with his mace raised over his head, goes to attack the beast. Ooh, rolls a 2 plus 2 is a 4. Well, he at that point goes to attempt to hit the beast, but it quickly dodges out of the way of the attack. The wizard at that point can see in between these two and has the line of sight on that wolf, and cast a fireball at it. See how this goes. Which is an 8, which is, as the raw magical energy spews forth from his hand, a fireball goes shooting in between the two adventurers, illuminating them and fire until they're surprised to see the fireball hit the animal and engulf its fur into flame. It screams out, but part of its fur is charred, but it is not dead, and it's in agony and very, very upset at this point. This wolf charges the warrior. He has a total of 7. His defense is a 2. The warrior at that point takes 5 points of damage. Yeesh. Now let's see what happens to the cleric. 4 plus 4 is an 8. He has a defense of 2. He's going to take 6 more points. At this point, the cleric is extremely wounded and close to death. Very weak. The wolf howls out, seeing how weak he is and close to death, and thinking about a delicious meal it's going to have, ripping that human from limb to limb. The warrior returns the favor of an attack with his sword to this beast first. I'll take the 6. Plus a 5 is an 11, which is more than enough to kill him. He slays the wolf. At that point, the elf steps up this way with another arrow knocked and releases the arrow at the wolf. Let's see how he does. Oh, he rolls an 8 and a 4. So I'm not going to even add his bonus. That's way more than enough for what he has left. The arrow finds its mark and kills the beast. The cleric slumps to one knee, losing a lot of blood, and is very weak at this point. The elf comes to his assistance and casts blessing upon him. At that point, it's going to be a d6 plus 5. Let's see how many. So he cures 7 points of damage, which is not bad at all. So he's a lot better than what he was. They get to their feet. They get the cleric to his feet, and they start heading towards the village. As they round the very last point of the curve, they exit the Slavic forest, and it opens up into wide open plain areas of tall grass, and all around them they can see looks like fog that's tumbling and curling, and it almost looks like hands reaching out for them, trying to draw them back into the forest. They noticed, even though the sky is gray and overcast, that the sun is starting to get low into the sky towards late afternoon. They enter the city at that point. That's city, I'm sorry. City is the wrong word. The village of Barovia. So we'll have something sort of like this as they're walking down through the city of these old buildings. Something draws their attention. All of the buildings seem to have large scrape marks into the woodwork. All the windows are boarded up. There are strange symbols that look like they're painted on the wood like holy symbols. There's tall shapes that loom out of the dense fog that surrounds everything. The muddy ground underfoot gives way to slick, wet cobblestone. The tall shapes become recognizable as the dwellings of the village of Barovia. The windows of each house stare out from pools of black nothingness. No sound cuts the silence except for a single mournful sobbing that echoes through the streets from a distance. The first sight of basically of anything that they see is a sparse light that comes from a building. It spills out from behind drawn heavy curtains. A sign over the door creaks on its hinges, proclaiming this Bildress Mercantile. They decide at that point to enter into the building to see what is in there and what it has to offer. As they enter into the building, there we go. They notice there are two figures, or people I should say, inside. One man that seems rather pompous, and then another one behind him that seems to be somewhat slow, almost, I guess you could say, retarded in a way. And the man at that point looks at the adventurers and in very broken language tells them it's not safe after sundown. It's not safe after sundown. The other gentleman eyes him and gives him a dirty look. He puts his head down and goes back to his duties and moving the merchandise around. He introduces himself. My name is Bildreth. I am the merchant in these parts. I haven't seen you around before. Everything you see here you can buy. Prices are non-negotiable. Gold only. As they look around, he offers a bunch in his shop as far as weapons, armor, healing potions, adventuring gear, odds and ends, holy symbols, and at that point, I don't think I'm going to purchase anything because these characters, I pretty much outfitted them the way that I wanted to. I will. Well, let's see. I'm going to leave it up to the dice to decide this one. I'll see if he has a map of the area that my characters can buy. we'll say a higher than a 33%, he'll have something. This will be my tens, that will be my ones. 52. Uh-huh. Bildrith looks at him suspiciously and says, yes, I do have a map. The price will be 125 gold coin. At that point, the adventurers look at themselves and count their money, and they do not have enough. He rolls his eyes and says, all prices are non-negotiable. If you wish to purchase the map, I want 125 gold. If not, go and make some money, come back and see me later. At that point, they decide to exit the shop back out into the street, thinking to themselves, what a jerk. As they move further into this strange village that they're in, and they can't help but notice that all the buildings just, it looks like claw marks all over all the wood and everything torn apart. The sound of a woman at that point weeping that seems to be echoing through everywhere, and it seems to be bouncing off of all of the village structures. They at this point find themselves at another structure that looks like it has signs of life. A single shaft of light thrusts into the main square, its brightness like a solid pillar in the heavy fog. Above the gaping doorway, a sign hangs precariously, askew proclaiming this, the Blood of the Vine Tavern. They open the door, and they all feel a bit relieved because now at this point they have found a tavern, so maybe they will get more answers to their questions. And let's set up a tavern for this little to do. I love these tile sets. They work out awesome for this. The adventurers come into the area. The elf notices it right away. Over here at the barkeep sits there vigorously cleaning the glasses, staring at him almost like he's in a trance. There's a couple of villagers that sit quietly by the hearth, sipping on ale, wine, whatever they are drinking, and they look very solace, very depressed, if you will, and do not even acknowledge the adventurers walking in. Over here behind the bar in this area, there is a table. Sitting at the table, there are 3 women dressed very familiarly to the way that the man that gave them the note in the last tavern looks. They eye them and then talk amongst themselves as if they're not even interested that they are there. The warrior approaches the bar and he says, good evening. How are you doing? The barkeep looks up at him, looks down at his glass. What do you want? At that point, the warrior looks over his shoulder at the rest of his comrades and looks back and he says, "We'll take 4 L's, and can you can you tell us exactly where we're at?" The barkeep pays no attention. He pours 4 L's, slams them down onto the bar, taking the gold coin, and goes back to cleaning the glasses as if they don't even exist. The warrior at that point looks back at the wizard and nudges him to approach the bar. Vizante approaches the bar and pulls out the letters that they found along their way and says, could you tell me, kind sir, who the burgomeister of this village may be?" At that point, the barkeep looks up at him, shakes his head quietly, looks back down at the glasses, and keeps cleaning them vigorously. Over here in the corner is a gentleman that's, at that point, quietly sipping on his wine and overhears the conversation, and then joins them as he comes up. He says, "I could not help but overhear your conversation. You were looking for the Burgermaster. My name is Ismark. I am the son of the Burgermeister. How can I help you?" At that point, Vizante shows him the letters. He looks at him and says, "Please join me at my table." And at that point, they join him at the table. He draws the candle closer so he can read the notes. He looks at him and he says, "I recognize the handwriting of this one, warning people to stay away from this cursed land. This, in fact, was my father's handwriting. But the first one you received, this is a forgery. It's not my father's handwriting. I can't say where it came from." He says, "But since you have answered the calling and come to help us," he says, "it would be rude to turn you away. These areas are dangerous after nightfall, and I will put you up for the evening. I will give you free room and board and see you are taken care of. And then in the morning, if you still wish to help, we'll discuss it further." At that point, they finish their ale and they follow Ismark as he leads them through town. As they exit through the, not exit through the town, but they go deeper into the town, into the outskirts. They come to a weary-looking mansion that squats behind a rusted iron fence. The iron gates are twisted and torn. The right gate lies cast aside, while the left swings crazily in the wind. The stuttering squeal and clang of the gate repeats with mindless precision. Weeds choke the grounds and press with menacing upon the house itself. Yet against the walls the growth has been trodden under to form a path all about the domain. Heavy claw markings have stripped the once beautiful finish off the walls. Great black blottings tell of the fires that have assailed the walls. Not a pane nor shard of glass stand in any window. All the windows are barred with heavy planking, each plank marked with stains of evil omen. As they enter into they follow, at that point, Ismark up to the door. Ismark knocks on the door and they hear A woman's voice on the other end asks, "Who is it?" He says, "It's me, Ismark, and some guests. Let me in." The door opens very slowly, and they can see the partial face of a young girl that looks out. And at that point, she says, "Ismark, is everything okay?" He says, "Yeah, it's okay." The door opens up, and they enter inside. The young girl eyes the adventurers and looks a bit weary and scared. Ismark reassures her that everything is okay and not to worry. They notice that the interior of the house is well furnished, although the fixtures show signs of considerable wear. Obvious oddities are the boarded up windows and the overuse of holy symbols in every room. As they enter into the back room, which will be over here, they find that the Burgenmeister at that point has passed away. His body is lying in the dark room with candles burning in his honor. The stench of the corpse is horrible and makes the adventurers retch momentarily. Irina asks the warrior, are you here to help us?" At that point, the Carrion looks at her and notices she has wounds on her neck. She quickly, at that point, takes your scarf and covers them to hide them from him. And she, at that point, looks down at the floor and she says, "We are all damned here. We need help. We need help to stop this evil." The elf looks at Carrion and has a very suspicious look about his face. Irina, what the elf thinks is very sweet, but she's troubled. She's very troubled. But he can see that even though she appears very meek and mild deep down, she is a very strong-willed individual and eyes her with suspicion. At that point, Ismark asks Irina, "Will you show our guests to the guest quarters and make sure that they are comfortable for the evening?" Irina says, "Of course, follow me this way." They follow Irina through the mansion, and Irina leads them out to another area. They find the quarters very comfortable. As they enter into the quarters, there's a fireplace and very nice furnishings to be able to sleep for very comfortably. There we go. I love these tiles. So she sits and speaks with the adventurers quite briefly, and she talks about how sad she is that her father has passed. And Irina brings up how she doesn't remember her early past, how she just appeared in this land, but she has no recollection of how she got here. But her father, the Burgermeister, took her in and adopted her, loved her, and raised her as his own. Night after night, the house was under attack by some evil. And her father, at that point, would say prayers and put out holy symbols to try to resist the evil. But he died a natural death. Strangely, she says, since he has died, the wolves have not attacked the house. And my father has been dead for nearly 10 days now. No one from the town has been brave enough to help Ismark take him to the cemetery and bury him. I'm not much help because I'm pretty weak myself, but maybe you could help take him to the cemetery and bury him in the morning. At that point, the cleric says he would be honored to help and perform last rites, if any, on the Burgermeister and see that he's given a proper burial and laid to rest. With that, Irina greets him good night and leaves him to the guest house, returning to the main mansion. As the night wears on and the fire starts to grow dim, at that point, they become comfortable and their weariness begins to fade. The silence is broken by the sound of wolves howling outside of the guest house. And as they begin to awaken and come to their senses as to what's going on, they start to hear loud banging noises out on the outside walls of what sounds like scrape marks coming from everywhere. It doesn't take long before one of the windows at that point is smashed inwards. Glass goes sliding across the wooden floor of this small guest house. Fog rolls into the guest house, and at that point, a wolf hops through the broken window, baring its teeth, followed by another, and then yet another. All of them howling and chattering. The adventurers scramble to their feet. The first one to get to his feet with a sword drawn at that point is Carrion. He takes a step forward with his sword drawn and swings at the first wolf that has invaded the guest house. At that, his sword finds its mark and kills the beast swiftly, not even giving him the time to howl out in agony. The elf, with no time to draw the bow or knock an arrow, just draws the scimitar and moves in on the second wolf. Ooh, pretty good roll. 6, and he gets a 5, which is 11. More than enough at that point. His scimitar comes down swiftly and quickly, cutting through the beast. Blood spurts forth as the animal falls beneath the blade. The cleric draws his mace and gets ready to cross the room to deal with the animal, when the animal retreats jumping out the window like it's been called by some invisible force they do not hear, retreating into the night. And then they can hear a hollow, echoing laughter that seems to come from everywhere but nowhere, going. It is at that point that the adventurers take some furniture that they found and make a makeshift way to board up the hole in the window. They add more wood to the fire, and the elf decides to take first watch and watch over his comrades while the rest of them sleep. The rest of the night goes somewhat uneventful into the morning as the first light streams into the guest house, a gray, dull light. They all awake to go outside, expecting to see perhaps better weather, sunny skies, but yet the only thing they find is more thick gray clouds that seem to strangle out the sunlight, followed by wafting strands of misty fog that cover everything. They enter into the main mansion area and at that point retch a bit from the smell of the rotting corpse. There they meet up with Ismark, and the cleric tells him he would be honored to assist him with the burial of his father and give him any last rites that he may at that point help him with. The man tears up and thanks him repeatedly for the help. It is at that point he says, well, but before we do this, let me at least let me feed you and make sure you are taken care of. They venture back into town, where at that point they go back to the Bloodvine Tavern. He buys them a round of ale and some breakfast to quench their thirst and fill their bellies, and returns back to the mansion. There, the cleric helps with the final wrappings of the father, and the adventurers, despite the smell, all help carry the corpse across town as they are eyed by a few villagers that are out and about at that time of day, give them weird looks, not making eye contact, but skittish and almost resentful for the fact that they are there. It is eerily quiet and nobody talks. And as they head towards the cemetery, they come to the church. Atop a slight rise against the very roots of the castle pillar stone stands a gray, sagging edifice of stone and wood. This church was weathered, the assault of evil for centuries on end, and is worn and weary. The bell tower hangs to one side, its sweet tone long silenced. Flickering light shines through holes burned through the roof shingles. The rafters strain feebly under their load. Oh, let's get a church to put out there, eh? So, they enter up to the church. The doors are weary and beaten. As they enter into the church, there is a priest that is praying and chanting. He turns around, and obviously, by the look of him, he has not had much sleep. His voice is hoarse and weak, and by the sounds of things, he's been praying and chanting all night long. There are holy symbols painted all over the inside of the church, and he clears his throat as best as he can, and he says, "My name is Father Donovich Barbarian. What can I help you with?" At that point, Ismark talks to him and he says, "These brave gentlemen have decided to bury my father. I just need your blessing to take him to the cemetery to do so." He says, "Of course, of course, of course." At that point, they take him up into the cemetery area. They bury him into the soil, and the cleric reads the father last rites as they bury the soil over the shrouded body, and they return to the church. Inside, the priest offers them some wine, and he welcomes them to Barbaria and warns them, "This place it's evil, it is wicked, and it has been oppressed by this evil for a long time." He says, "But enough, I must get some rest and get prepared for tonight." He says, "Please make yourself at home and stay as long as you want. Feel free to leave a donation." The priest retires, and at that point, to his private quarters to sleep during the day, obviously, so he can pray and chant throughout the night. At that point, Visanti goes through the library looking over some of the texts that they have. He comes across a book in the library of Ravenloft, and as he's reading, he learns about this horrible being referred to as the Devil Strahd. It points out it is known from ancient times that Strahd kept meticulous notes on all that he did and said. At that point, Visanti reads on, thinking, if this is the enemy spreading the evil, maybe we can learn something how to defeat him. He learns that Irina Kolania was not the natural daughter of Koilana Indorovich. Although Irina never knew, old Koilan found her one day at the edge of the Slavich woods near the pillar stone of Ravenloft. She was but a girl then and seemed to have no memory of her past. Old Koilan adopted her as though she were his own and loved her dearly. At that point, it is late morning. They decide to return into town. As they get into town again, they hear the sobbing of what sounds like a woman again, echoing through the town. At this point, the warrior, Carrion, decides to investigate and say, let's see what the hell is going on and what's wrong with this person and if we can help. He follows the sound of the sobbing. A moaning sob floats through the still gray streets, coloring your thoughts with sadness. The sound flows from a dark two-story townhouse. The house is boarded up and barricaded from the inside. At that point, he is able to use his strength to open up the door, and they enter slowly and cautiously. They hear the sobbing coming from the upstairs room. As they climb the stairs, creaking beneath their feet, and open up the door, they find a woman sitting in what appears to be a room that was once a child's, and she's holding a small doll, crying and distraught. She looks up at them and she says, "What, have you come to see what Mad Mary is crying about this time?" The woman looks obviously distressed. She says that Mary hid her beloved daughter, Gertrude, in the house for her entire life, and then one day Gertrude broke out of the house. She has never come back, and her mother fears that the evil that plagues this land has claimed her as a victim. It is at that point the cleric offers his condolences and a few words of prayer to try to ease her suffering. They exit back into town where they meet up with Ismark, and they return to the mansion. Irina and Ismark have a conversation about the going ons that have happened in this town and the evil. She says the only way to stop the evil, the only way to escape this town, and the only way for you to return from where you came from is you must find this evil and you must destroy him. The evil has a name. As the girl looks up and says, his name is Strahd, but people know him in this part as the devil. His full name, though, is the Count Strahd von Zarovich, and he is what some people may call a vampire. She says, now, if you're after riches, there are a lot of riches at that point in his castle. But what we need is some brave adventurers to go in there, rid us of this evil, liberate the land. And then at that point, you will find the artifact inside of there that'll open up the portal, sending you back to where you came. The adventurers all talk amongst themselves and decide that they've come this far and they've gotten more answers here so far than they have anywhere else. So it only makes sense to press on to the castle and at that point try to destroy this devil that oppresses the land. The Burgomeister's son, Ismark, says it's not safe to travel these lands at night. It's already afternoon and you should stay another evening and leave first thing in the morning. He says you're more than welcome to stay into the guest house again if you would like. At that point, the adventurers accept and decide to go back into town and to try to dig up some more clues. They spend some time at the tavern and get some ales, and then at that point, they go back to Bildris Mercantile and they try to wager with him once again. No, I said before, 125 gold coin for the map. We do not barter. We do not do deals here with your kind. If you do not have 125 gold, then you can go away. If you're looking for a way out of town, it's very simple. Just follow the road out. It'll lead you away. But you will be warned. You cannot go back the way that you came in. The only way out is in the other side of town. Good luck, and now that you do not have money, get out. They return to the mansion before nightfall, and at that point, they decide to use the same tactic as before. Keep the hearth burning nice and warm, and the elf at that point will take watch while the rest of them get some rest. It's not long after nightfall that they once again hear the loud thumping noise outside, but this time it's not accompanied by wolves' howls or cries. And the makeshift planking that they put up over the window doesn't seem to hold that long before it is busted in, wood splinters. And then at that point, a stench of rotting flesh on the cold, foggy mist that rolls into the guest room. The elf at that point alerts everybody. He has his scimitar drawn and ready. The cleric at that point climbs to his feet as well with the warrior, but this time he had his sword drawn and laying next to him, ready in his hand. The wizard sits up and grabs his staff, and in the window through the mist appear ghouls thirsty for fresh blood and human flesh. As they, at that point, emerge from the heavy, thick fog that comes pouring into the guest room, the warrior Carrion steps up, swinging his sword. His mind toils in fear, unbelieving what he sees, an animated corpse walking towards him. Ooh, rolls a 6, plus he has a 5. 11. His sword at that point quickly makes quick work, chopping the ghoul's head from its shoulder. Its already dead, reanimated body at that point slumps to the floor beneath the warrior as putrid black blood oozes out onto the wood. The elf at that point swings his scimitar towards the other undead. Unfortunately, his scimitar misses its mark of taking its head from its shoulder and only does a minor wound to its arm. The ghoul at that point, its white eyes turn its direction towards the elf. Its mouth opens up and a putrid, nasty odor of death emits from it as it gets ready to plan its attack, ripping the flesh from the elf. The cleric at that point picks up his mace and screams, "Back to the darkness with you, foul beast." As he takes a step, he splashes holy water at the ghoul. The ghoul at that point stumbles backwards as its skin almost looks like The holy water is acid burning through its skin, and then he winds up his mace and swings at the beast. His mace comes down and delivers a crushing blow to its shoulder. And the once living tissue, the sound of snapping bone, and its arm falls limp. The ghoul at that point engages the cleric in eye contact, and its white eyes pierce into him. It belches out a loud growl, and the smell of rotting flesh at that point overcomes the cleric, and he takes a moment to retch. Hmm. Hold on a sec. I am looking up a spell definition real quick. Nope, I do not want to do that. He's going to cast a lightning bolt at this one right here. The lightning protrudes from the palm of his hand. It makes a long arc and finds the ghoul, and the electricity at that point starts to cook the putrid flesh that comes off of this thing. The ghoul trembles in reaction of the electricity searing through its body. It slumps to its knees and then falls face first onto the floor, dead. The ghoul at that point, still eyeing the cleric, moves in to take its attack. The ghoul reaches in, grabs the cleric, and chomps down, taking a bite of flesh from the cleric. The cleric screams out in the pain. It is at that point the ghoul has blood streaming down from its mouth and a large chunk of flesh from the cleric that it stumbles backwards into the fog, disappearing. And as the fog begins to suck back out the window, they once again hear the hollow, empty laugh. Alrighty. So the rest of the evening, actually I have to check on something real quick because the ghoul, I have to see if he gets diseased from this ghoul. All right. Nope. According to these, I'm not going to have to worry about that, so I'll just deal with that later. But I think that's going to wrap up this game session. I know I went a little longer than what I wanted to, but if you guys enjoyed this and you would like to see more of it, because we're at the point in the adventure to where they are going to leave in the morning. Now, if you're curious on the map, this is where we came in at. We traveled through the gates into here and traveled into Bavaria, up here to where the church, or the cemetery, I'm sorry, was at, and then back to where the mansion area is. And of course, continuing on the adventure, we'll be exiting Bavaria towards Castle Ravenloft. Alright, guys. If you enjoyed the video, give me a like, or click the subscribe button and the little bell icon, and at that point, you will get notified when I make a new video and update it. Alright, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.